Clytus, I'm bored. What plaything can you offer me today?
An obscure body in the SK system, Your Majesty. The inhabitants refer to it as
The Ron Pertee Show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Ron Pertee Show. This week we have Steven Tsapelas here, and we're talking about the new pilot that he's been working on, Hot and Nerdy, and we're going to talk about We Need Girlfriends, because I do, and I'm hoping that maybe by talking about the series, he can shed some light on that, because, yeah, that's a lot of, and we're going to find out a little bit about reality TV. I wouldn't call it reality TV, but I guess morning or daytime TV would be the best thing. So Steven, thank you so much for being on the program.
Oh, thank you for having me, Ron. I'm very excited to be here.
It's been a long time coming.
Definitely. I feel like we've been talking about it for a while. I just never really was doing anything worth note. So,
well, I mean, I think we started talking about it right when you were pitching. Was it the Kickstarter or was it Indiegogo for? It was Kickstarter for Hot and Nerdy.
It was Indiegogo. Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's around when it happened, and then we hit our goal way earlier than I thought we would. So
that's not a bad thing.
It kind of worked.
Yeah, so now you're big in the nerd culture, as am I. We have our things, and now growing up though, you grew up in Long Island, right?
Yeah, I was born in Queens, Jamaica, Queens, and then when I was about 3.5, we moved to Bethpage on Long Island.
Okay. That means so much to a guy from Wisconsin.
Seriously.
But now, when you were growing up, did you have a lot of exposure to? I guess we have to use the term nerdy because there's not really any other kind of term we can use, I suppose.
Sure. Yeah.
Were you exposed to a lot of that stuff, or?
I was. I mean, growing up, I was a big television freak. I just loved, watching TV all day, and I gravitated towards superhero shows, specifically the 60s Batman show was my favorite thing as a kid. Still is my favorite thing. And then, comic books, the Amazing Spider-Man cartoon was a big one, the Superman cartoons. So as a young kid, that was kind of my exposure.
Now, what was, okay, I always love asking this question of fellow geeks, I guess.
Of course.
But what was your first comic book?
I was actually just talking to my wife about this, and I'm sure she was very interested in the conversation. I was just telling her, I remember in second grade, I brought a Batman book to school, Batman comic book, and it might have been an issue with Magpie. That was the name of the villain.
Okay.
And we had free reading. If we finished our work, we were allowed to read books. So I brought my comic book, and my teacher was like, "Oh, you can't read that." I was like, "Well, why not?" And she's like, "That's a comic book. That's not a book." I'm like, "It's the same thing."
I still hear the word book in there.
Yeah. So that's what I remember. And then I remember, I might still have it. There's a Captain America issue where he gets hit with some sort of ray and turns into a teenager.
Oh, geez.
He gets super soldiered.
Oh, boy.
So that was another big one. So Batman and Captain America are the two comic books that I remember.
I remember going to, we had, I don't know if it was a nationwide thing or if it was just a regional thing, but we had this thing called the Little Professor Bookstore. And they had this little rack with comic books on it. And I don't know what it was, but it was issue 273 of Uncanny X-Men. And on the cover is Strong Guy and Rogue fighting. And and I didn't realize it that I was actually on the cusp of the beginning of the end of Uncanny X-Men, because that's when the Muir Island saga started with Shadow King.
Of course.
And when all the X team, the X Factor and the X-Men came together, and there was the all new X Factor with Havoc and Polaris and all that. I had no idea what I was getting into. I had no idea what was going on, but I was like, wow, this guy with these claws is pretty cool. And the guy who's throwing the playing cards, he's pretty cool. Yeah. So that was. Yeah.
We're kind of the same age, and I remember like 1988, 1989 is kind of when the dam broke a little bit.
Yeah.
And we got a comic book store in my town. It was called Heroes World, and that was just, like a life-changing moment when I could go to a store and buy comic books and look at, toys and posters and reference books. And I remember seeing Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, like right behind the counter, and just being like, what is that? That looks way scarier than the Batman I know.
Yeah, it's like, why is he breaking a gun in half? What's going on? Did something happen to him?
Yeah. Why is Batman mad?
Exactly. It's like, what happened to him in his past?
Yeah.
And then as you grow older, you're like, oh, we're gonna get his origin again. Great. Okay.
I can't believe how many times I've seen the Wayne family, get killed in Crime Alley now.
It's almost like, okay, and they're going to shoot here, the pearls are going to drop there. Okay. Thank you for that again, Mr. Snyder. Thank you. That was great because we had to see it again.
I thought Spider-Man: Homecoming was so wise not to show Uncle Ben get killed again.
My issue with Homecoming though is that they never even mention Uncle Ben.
Yeah. A lot of people said that. Yeah, I could see that.
And then the whole Iron Spider thing kind of rubbed me the wrong way too. But I can see him like getting the suit and everything in Infinity War. I can understand that, but I wanted more Peter being Peter and Peter not having to rely on, hey, look what Mr. Stark got me.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, that's but I'm still a big fan of Spider-Man 2 with Doc Ock. I think that was just so good.
Yeah, I often think that's my favorite comic book movie. Going back like between that and Dark Knight, I think are the two that really set the tone.
Yeah, just a little bit. And I love how they threw in the whole like him getting rid of not losing his powers and all that kind of stuff. That was great. But now you mentioned the comic shop opening and kind of everything being there at your visual disposal, as it were.
Yes.
Now, growing up, did your parents, did they foster the idea of you reading comic books, or was it kind of like, you should be reading Tolstoy instead?
My parents didn't really mind it. Like my parents don't really, they're not avid readers. So I think just the idea that I was reading a book was good enough for them.
Right.
And they were both fans of the 60s Batman. I think they kind of turned me on to it initially. So yeah, they were cool with it. And they put up with me asking daily to go to Heroes World and later on to go to comic book conventions. So yeah, they've always been very supportive of my nerdy interests.
Now, nerdy stuff aside, because we could go on for hours about that stuff. We really could.
Yes.
But you and I share a love of a certain television producer. And that's Norman Lear.
Yes.
Now, when it comes to Norman Lear, what was the first thing you saw that he put out, and how much of an effect does he have on what you're doing now?
I mean, for me, it's as far back as I can remember. Once again, if I think back, I was living in Jamaica, so I was 3.5. Jamaica, Queens, not Jamaica, the island. So I was about 3.5, and my parents loved All in the Family. There were reruns on our local Fox station, and it just felt to me like, because I was a kid in Queens, that I was watching almost like a documentary.
Right.
It felt like if I walked down the street, I could see Archie Bunker. So yeah, I mean, as far back as I can remember, Archie Bunker was a character that was in my house.
Right. Now that actually the show took place in Jamaica, Queens, didn't it?
It took place in Astoria,
right?
I believe, but the house was actually in Forest Hills, and I eventually moved to Forest Hills, and I lived about a mile away from that house.
Oh, that's got. Did you make the trek?
Oh, many times.
Many
times.
And is like did you read up a lot about him when you found out? Because I know when you're younger and you're watching, you're just like, wow, there's people in this box in front of me who are doing things. At what point did you research Norman Lear and find out that he's this? I guess, can we call him a comedic genius?
Oh, definitely. I mean,
yeah.
I think that when I knew who he was when they brought back. There was like a spinoff of All in the Family called 704 Hauser Street.
Yep.
And I remember watching the Entertainment Tonight piece about that. So that was about 1995, I want to say.
Something like
right?
That sounds about right, yeah. I kind of gave up on reboots when Gloria came out.
Oh,
it's
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That was with Burgess Meredith.
Yes, it was. And didn't it last like a season tops?
I believe so.
Yeah, that.
I think that's yeah. But yeah, I mean, once I got into television writing and wanting to do that, Norman Lear was kind of my North Star, basically. Like I like the way he would mix the the emotion of it with the storylines and the comedy, and it was always about the characters, always coming from them. I mean, we can get to Weenie Girlfriends in a bit, but definitely Norman Lear was a huge inspiration, and still is.
I know whenever I watch, and see, this is why Norman Lear is so great, I think, is the fact that you can, at times, even though Archie is like this horrible racist, let's be honest,
Yes.
you can sometimes empathize with him and be like, oh, well, maybe it was for him, it was more, he really is the product of the whole nurture versus nature type thing.
Sure.
But then at times you can, you hear Mike rambling on stuff, and you're just like, wow, you're not exactly right either.
Yeah, true. Very true. Yeah. And same with Maude. Maude was a very similar way, where Maude portrayed the flip side of the Archie Bunker character, and she was often wrong.
Oh yeah, and that's and I loved how Maude was like one of the first shows to deal with abortion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like Norman Lear, even today with the reboot of One Day at a Time, which I actually enjoy quite a bit. I thought I wasn't going to like it because it was like some Netflix kind of just throwaway, but it's actually not bad because it's dealing with a lot of hot button issues.
Really good.
Yeah, like the daughter being a lesbian and stuff. It's like, wow, that's just, okay, I get it. That's cool. Okay, and then but and he's not, what, he 95 now?
I think so.
And he's still working?
So. I listen to his podcast every now and again.
Yeah, I can't. I have to want to hear the guest he's got on. Like when he had Amy Poehler on, I was like,
yes.
I was all in for that. And I haven't kind of like I have so many podcasts to catch up on. Like
it's
I have,
true, yeah.
like the Alan Alda one, I keep subscribed to. Not because I am a fan of like him talking about communication. I'm just waiting for the MASH reunion that's coming.
Is that coming?
It's coming, and the only one
subscribe to that one as well.
Yeah, the only one I think I'm trying to remember now. Was MASH a big thing for you growing up too?
I remember living in my house in Queens and seeing my dad watch MASH, and just knowing that it was a show for my dad and not for me. So
a lot of those jokes go, you really have to be a certain age to get the jokes on that show. That was not something that where a lot of like the movie, like for instance, Ghostbusters, kids can enjoy it because they can see all the ghosts and all the proton packs and all that kind of stuff, but the jokes are there for the adults. And
definitely.
That's exactly what MASH was. Well, MASH didn't have anything for the kids unless kids like blood.
No. War is a very a very tough concept for a 3-year-old. So.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, that's
it didn't land for me.
Yeah, I was like, what's going on here? Okay, and then as you get older, you're like, oh, well, this is actually pretty smart. But I'm one of those guys who sits there and I'm watching MASH and I'm just like, okay, well, that's wrong and that's wrong. And like they talk about, oh, well, Godzilla's going to be playing. No, it's not because it didn't come out. It wasn't out in 1953. Sorry.
There was no internet to look to, to see what they got wrong on MASH back then.
Well, now that's all anybody does. I remember I was talking to Joe Bob Briggs, and we were talking about how before the internet, nobody gave a damn about that kind of stuff. They just kind of like, and then people would freeze frame things, just kind of frame by frame.
Yeah.
Getting to the. So now, okay, you're growing up and things are going great. You're watching You're All in the Family. You're loving your Norman Lear.
Correct.
Now, which is always an amazing thing. Now, at what point did you decide that you wanted to be a TV writer? Because, and now here's the thing: we'll talk about We Need Girlfriends in a second. But I think a lot of shows that came out on YouTube and Vimeo and stuff, that's the new TV because there's not a lot. I mean, people are talking about the golden age of television again. But a lot of that is on Netflix now. So it's kind of, you're kind of like, you have to look to the online for quality television. But at what point did you decide, this is what I want to do? I want to do what Norman does.
So speaking of Ghostbusters, I remember being in first grade. Ghostbusters was like the thing, back then. And I was just learning how to read. And I read that the same guys who played Egon and Ray had written the movie, and that was just mind blowing to me as a 7-year-old. And that's when I realized that people wrote movies, and that's kind of when I started doing my own stuff, like in first grade, writing little short stories and writing little movies. And then that just continued through until I was ready to go to college, and I decided to become a film major. And then was just going to do films, and that was my goal. And then I teamed up with my two friends, Brian Amiot and Angel Acevedo, and that's when we went from film to the web series route. And that's kind of when that became the thing.
Now, when it comes to you were a film major, at what point did you see, I guess, web TV? We'll just call it that for lack of a better term. At what point did that become where you wanted to go? I mean, because you spent all this time as a film major, and all of a sudden, like, yeah, I'm going to work in TV instead.
Well, we were Brian, Angel, and I. We were living together. We were making films together. We were doing competition films, so it would be a 24-hour film festival, 48-hour film festival,
right,
where you have that amount of time to write and produce a movie. And so we were getting pretty good at it. We were getting good at working as a unit. And then we were going to do a big short film, like a 20 or 30-minute short film. And the goal was always to make a feature film. That's all that we wanted to do. But feature films take a couple of weeks to shoot at least, and they take a lot of money, and we had neither the time nor the money.
Right.
So Brian had started to see, web shows kind of pop up. Specifically, Channel 101 was kind of starting up.
Right.
And so he said, "Why don't we do that instead? We can tell like a longer story over the course of 10 to 12 episodes." And that was the start of it. That was kind of the germ of the idea to move from making short films and then longer short films to making an ongoing series.
Right. Now, when it comes to your stuff, the stuff that you write, I noticed that you put a lot of yourself into it.
Yes.
And what was the impetus? I guess I'm trying to use my word a day calendar. Of We Need Girlfriends.
So we made that in 2006, and so we were, broke. We were living in New York, which is expensive. We were all basically, production assistants, working kind of low end jobs. And so when we started to think, well, let's do a show, it's like, well, what do we have? Well, we have an apartment, and that's about it. And we have the streets around the apartment. And so we started to think of, well, what kind of story can we tell in that? And at the time, we had all had girlfriends in college, and then we all broke up around the same time. And so Brian, Angel, and I were single together and spending all of our time together. And then we started to watch Entourage, and it was like the exact opposite of our lives.
Right.
And so I was like, why don't we just do Entourage, but like, about us, like three guys who just it never works out for them. They never do well with girls, and they're never invited to the cool parties. It's just three guys in Queens trying to survive after a breakup and see what the next step is. And so that was kind of where it started. And we literally, the three characters were myself, Brian, and Angel, just to a T. So we did not differ that far from our personalities.
And now, when you were sitting, that was you were the one that basically wrote everything. Did they come to you with stories about their lives to kind of slide into the scripts, or was a lot of it made up, or?
It was all of that. I mean, most of it was just stuff that happened to us that we'd say, oh, that would be funny. Before we shot anything, we kind of roughed out, I think 12 episodes, basically, like not every episode individually, but kind of like the long arc of where the story would go.
Right.
And then through the course of the year that we made it, we would, things would happen to us, and we'd say, oh, that'd be great for an episode of We Need Girlfriends. And, specifically a lot of the dialogue exchanges were real from us. The character moments were very real from us. So it was, we were living it. We were living the show. We were working on the show. It was just like there was no separation basically at that point.
And then now you did 12 episodes, 10 episodes? I forget how many.
We produced 12, but only 11 were released. There was an issue with one of them.
What was the issue with the one that never came out?
There was a camera issue. Basically, there was an issue with one of the playback heads on the camera, and we thought it was recording wrong. And so when we used the backup camera, and that had issues, and so the sound and video was just basically unusable.
Is that something that could maybe, with the advancements of technology, be fixed?
We actually, I think it was 2 years ago. We looped the dialogue, and we posted it, and it's online now. It looks and sounds awful, but it's there.
It's you got to finish it, right?
Yeah, and it's funny when we posted it, we realized, you know what, this was never a good episode. So it's almost a great thing that it worked out. Like the script was not that good, and so it's almost like the filmmaking gods were on our side that day.
You love it when happy accidents happen.
Yeah,
that's my entire career is happy accidents. Now, do you think that you could ever revisit We Need Girlfriends? I mean, especially because the position you're in now, you're married with kids. That kind of. Is that something that's in your past that you couldn't reconnect with?
Yeah, for it to happen again, and we did talk. So we stopped making it in 2007. So we have talked about it through the years. I think a few years ago we were going to do a 3-episode kind of reunion special, but it just never worked out for whatever reason. Like we've all kind of, myself and Brian and Angel, who produced it, and the 3 actors, Seth, Patrick, and Evan, we've all kind of moved across the country, and our lives are in different places, and so it would take a lot of effort to get that back.
Right. Well, plus, mentally, you're probably in a different place too.
Sure. Yeah. I think I could always write for those characters. I loved writing for those characters. It's just it would have to be with that same group of people. Right.
And plus, I think before we get going, because we're going to be talking about Hot and Nerdy, don't worry.
Sure.
Because I have many things to discuss when it comes to Hot and Nerdy.
Okay, great.
And I don't want to spoil things, but one of them has to do with one of the characters holding a certain toy from a certain movie.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. But you did something else after We Need Girlfriends, but my mind is drawing a blank because what I remember is you were shooting something.
Okay.
And I want to say Rob G and Tom Holland show up.
Yep. Yeah.
What was that? What was that?
That was a series called My Future Girlfriend.
Yes.
Another girlfriend show. It was basically a sci-fi comedy version of the Terminator.
And how long did that go?
We made 5 episodes, and we released them all at the same time. It was kind of like a mini movie.
Okay, like a mini series, like a British show.
Yes, yeah, something like that.
Now that was how much pressure was there having Tom Holland sitting there?
Well, so basically, yeah, my friend Rob Galuzzo had made a documentary about the Psycho sequels called The Psycho Legacy, and through that he became friends with Tom. And Fright Night is one of my favorite movies of all time.
It's so good.
Oh my God, it's the best. And Tom wanted to make his own web stuff at the time. He was experimenting with that, so we became kind of pen pals via email. And then when I moved to Los Angeles, I would just go get lunch with Tom Holland, and he's the nicest guy. He's got the best stories. And so eventually he came to the set of this show, and it was almost like that scene in Ed Wood when Bela Lugosi comes to set.
Oh, yeah.
Ed Wood freaks out. He gets so excited. I was so excited to have him there, and he was, great, supportive, and said it was going well, and, hugging everyone, patting everyone on the back. So
that's the greatest story ever.
High Pressure was pretty easy just because Tom Holland is super nice.
That's so awesome. That is so great. Now you went to film school. You were a film major. You've made We Need Girlfriends and My Future Girlfriend. And now we'll talk briefly about this. You work in daytime TV.
That's correct.
What
yes.
exactly do you do in daytime TV?
So about 6.5 years ago, I moved up to Connecticut, and I've been writing and producing the promos for a company owned by Maury Povich.
Oh boy!
And so we do all the promos for. We've done the Maury Show, we've done the Jerry Springer Show, a show called the Trisha Goddard Show, Crazy Talk, many different daytime talk shows. And so, yeah, that's how I've been making a living these past few years.
Now, how does that influence on a technical aspect a show like Hot and Nerdy, which we're going to get to in a few minutes?
Yeah, I think for me the biggest influence was the editing style, which is that, you know, now with my current job, I have to tell a story in a short amount of time, 30 seconds. And so to me, I'm always looking at ways, okay, how do we cut this down? How do we cut this down? I think that's kind of been the biggest benefit of doing, you know, whatever we do, 300, 400 promos a year.
Sweet Jesus. That's a lot of You Are Not the Fathers.
Yeah. I've written that line many times.
Is it when you type it out? Is it just autofill at this point?
My brain does the autofilling. Is he the father?
Yeah.
What will the results say?
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh boy. I remember I used to watch that stuff all the time, and then it just was like, wow, this is the same as the other one that was on. But that's not up to you. You just write the promos.
Yeah,
so.
I just do the promos.
Yeah, so we're going to take a really quick break here, folks, and we will be back to talk Hot and Nerdy, the new pilot. We'll be right back with Steven Tsapelas. You're listening to the Ron Pertee Show.
You're not wired to have a response to this sound. You're neutral to it, and you can hear it repeatedly without feeling anything. But when we introduce a new stimulus, save the food, we've achieved pulling a natural or inborn response from you. Save the food. Why are we doing this, you may ask? Save the food. Because this ad is trying to change the world's behavior through brainwashing. Because 40% of all food in the US never gets eaten. Save the food. And that costs a family of four $1,500 a year. Save the food. Cha-ching. It's worsening climate change through the release of methane gas. Save the food. Cha-ching. And it's wasting precious natural resources like our fresh water. Save the food. Cha-ching. So when you hear this sound, don't be neutral. Rethink your behavior. Cook it, store it, share it. Just don't waste it. For tips and recipes, visit savethefood.com. Brought to you by NRDC and the Ad Council.
For you, the listeners of the Ron Pertee Show, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. I recommend Paddle Your Own Canoe by Nick Offerman, read by Nick Offerman. It's just amazing to hear him read the book and add little things here and there. It's just fantastic. And there's just Amy Poehler's got one, Tina Fey. If you're a fan of comedy, a fan of autobiographies, definitely some stuff to check out. So head over to download your free audiobook today. Go to audibletrial.com/Ron Show. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Ron Show for your free audiobook.
The following is made possible by Dad.
Why was the basketball court all wet? Because the players kept dribbling all over it.
The dad joke. Corny, groan-worthy, but also one of the simplest ways to share a moment with your kids.
Why do you have to be careful when it's raining cats and dogs? Because you might step in a poodle.
And kids that spend more time with their dads grow up to be smarter, more successful.
Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding.
And, with any luck, funnier adults.
Why didn't the skeleton go to the dance? Because he didn't have any body to go with.
Dad jokes rule. So take a moment to make a moment and give your kid a laugh. It's as easy as going to fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
That's really funny.
right, everybody, we are back. I'm here with Steven Tsapelas, the writer and executive producer, the showrunner, I guess you could say, of Hot and Nerdy, which is a new pilot that I'm not exactly sure how you could see. How can people see it if they want to see it?
Well, right now we're submitting to festivals, so that's the best way. Or you can just shoot me an email or find me on Twitter, and I'll send you the link.
Now, the thing I have so many questions about this.
Sure.
First and foremost, let's get this out of the way, and we'll see who the real fans of this show are after this conversation about the prequels. There is a character, and they have a connection to the prequels,
Yep.
and you said that person's basically made up their mind when it comes to liking that movie or not.
Yes.
The Phantom Menace, because we should quantify this. The show is set in, you said, May of 2000.
Yeah,
Or it starts in May of 2000.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Now, if you have your druthers and the show does a complete run with everything you have set in your head, because a lot of times now with shows they have a distinct ending, like a point where
Sure.
they want to end the show. Do you have like a time frame that you want the show to follow?
Oh yeah. I mean, so basically the show is about a pair of comic book nerds on Long Island who are shocked when they see the first girl they've ever seen at a comic book convention. And so it's about nerd culture kind of becoming accepted. And to me that, so the show starts in May of 2000. To me, by the time Iron Man came out in 2008, that's when it was just mainstream for everyone.
Right.
And that was like the big Comic-Con year and all that stuff. So that's when that would be the ending point.
So basically, Robert Downey Jr. made being a nerd cool.
I think that was the turning point. I mean, like the final kind of nail on the coffin of this being a niche thing for basically children, and then the people that like me, who they would call weirdo and nerd and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, I totally get you there. I mean, I remember the only kind of shows I would go to would be at like VFW halls.
Yep.
And they would be one room sequestered off to the back because no one wanted. The only people that would even want to go in there were the people who really wanted to go in there.
Yep.
And it was just, I had no idea what I was doing when I would go into these places. I was not as well versed by this point as your characters are.
Yeah.
So I was kind of, because I remember at a certain point in high school just got too overwhelming, and I had to stop collecting. And then there was a brief period just recently where I've only been recollecting again for like I think the last, I want to say 5 years. It was
Okay.
right. It was right around the time that the Valiant reboot.
Okay.
So, and that's something only you, I, and other nerds will get. But remember when Archer and Armstrong were weird? No. But yeah, because I used to read in high school. I used to read Quantum and Woody from the original Valiant line. So that's
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Right.
But so the show basically, I mean, tell me if I'm getting this right or wrong. Is the comic book nerds meeting the girl at the thing and at the convention, and what ideally, I mean, you know what? We're gonna stop this line of questioning, and we're gonna go on to something else because I lost my train of thought.
Okay.
Yeah, congratulate and you know what? And it's staying in, people. You get to hear my flubs. This is John Stewart's fault. So let's we were talking about this during the break. The prequels.
Yes.
Much like the character in your show, have you made up your mind about them?
Oh yeah. I mean, I hate them, but so it's almost 20 years since the first one.
Right.
So it's starting to get to that point of nostalgia for me where I'm like, I kind of miss that time where like that innocence of not knowing how they're going to be.
Right.
And getting excited about new characters like Qui-Gon Jinn and Jar Jar Binks.
Ooh, Jar Jar.
Yeah,
Oh.
and actually, so I made an Indiegogo video for this project, and I unearthed like my a video where my friends and I camped out for Star Wars tickets.
Oh boy.
We were out there for 17 hours, and it was incredibly embarrassing. I mean, I was like as nerdy as a human being could be, and I put it in there just because I really wanted people to see my level of commitment to this project.
Right. I remember I also kind of camped out for tickets, but
yeah, we felt like we had to back then.
Oh, exactly. But here's the funny thing, and this is kind of it's an aside, but it's not an aside. There's a guy that comes into the comic shop I go to, which has been there for 27 years.
Wow.
So it's like, yeah, it's and if you're looking for old stuff, the owner's got it. He's got comics as far back as like Avengers 4.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, he's and if he has doubles, he's more than willing to sell you his Silver Age stuff. He's no qualms about that. Cool. I actually have an issue on hold. It's not the best issue, but it's Fantastic Four 59, I think.
I was on eBay recently, just kind of perusing some of those, and I lost a bit on number 51, which I'm very upset about.
Which one was 51? That was
that's This Man, This Monster.
I love that cover.
Oh, it's such a good cover.
I love that cover, and I actually I splurged and picked up the $150 Fantastic Four omnibus that just came out. That's like the first 50 issues.
Oh wow, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's a biggin', and it's on the good paper and all that kind of stuff. But let me get back to where I was. Stupid Fantastic Four. Better come back to Marvel and be good.
I hope so.
No.
That was always my favorite comic book. My favorite Marvel comic.
I didn't really get into the Fantastic Four until I got older, and because I think you really had to appreciate the whole family aspect of it. That's a huge dynamic for it. And then when they started adding like Valeria and Franklin, it's just like, oh, I can't relate to these people. There's a guy that comes into the comic shop, and he was first in line, and he comes running out of the theater, and he's like, I got the first 4 seats, and he's just like obnoxious about it, and the entire crowd turned on him, and they just like railed on him, and it was probably the best thing I've ever seen in my life, because I hate, if there's one thing I hate more than like jocks who appropriate the culture of nerds by like going to Target and getting a faded Captain America shirt and saying they're a fan. They've been a fan ever since the first Avenger.
Yeah. Anyone with muscles, I don't buy as a comic book fan.
Exactly. The only thing I hate worse than that are obnoxious nerds.
Yeah.
Like the ones who are always like, well, no, actually, it's this, and this, you know?
Yes. Well, and in my pilot, I purposely put in that character. Like,
oh, yes.
Like the kind of the comic book shop know-it-all.
Yep.
Who would always be hanging around the counter, always be like, oh, well, it's not good anymore, and this movie sucks, and here's who should have played Batman. And actually, I just went to my local comic book store last week, and there was a guy there who was that guy, who was saying how Black Panther's overrated and Captain Marvel's going to be terrible, and all this stuff. And I'm like, wow, these guys still exist.
Oh yeah, they still exist, and I think they're starting to get worse. It's just weird, you know.
Yeah.
But you have those kind of people, and you kind of have to deal with them now. But let's get deeper into hot and nerdy.
Sure.
I think I know which character is you.
Yes.
I think anybody who watches it would know which character is you.
Yeah, well, so there's the lead character's name is Alan, and that's basically how I was in the year 2000, just completely uncomfortable in my own skin and socially awkward. And yeah, that's definitely based on me.
Well, the thing about that though is I think that character is a little bit more socially okay. I can't think of a better word than that. Than his friend, because he didn't come walking out of a convention covered in green.
True. Yes.
You know, yeah. and that's not a spoiler because you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So we're okay.
No one knows.
Yes.
Yeah. So the two leads were played by Justin Chesney and Keelan Sarno, and yeah. So Alan is the kind of dopey, sweet, very socially awkward guy, and then Phil, who's played by Keeland, is completely oblivious to the world around him, thinks he's great, and kind of doesn't realize that he's wearing sweatpants in public and being obtuse and crude and all this kind of stuff.
Right. No, I know those people too. I hang out with them. But let me ask you this, because you actually focus on a couple of, they're not obscure characters
Sure.
in the comic book world, but they're not exactly talked about a lot. One in particular, and we won't go into how she's talked about, but one of them is She-Hulk.
Yes.
And it's before her current kind of like she's taken over for her cousin type thing where she's savage.
Yeah.
I don't like the new Avengers stuff. It's just I don't get it. I guess maybe I'm too old. But what was the reason to focus on her so much?
Well, again, this is kind of a semi-autobiographical piece, and I remember, so spoiler alert, there's kind of a focus in that scene on the Marvel swimsuit edition.
Right. Which
was
I had.
A real thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very odd. They were very sexy pictures of all of our favorite heroes, kind of scantily clad. And I remember my friend and I in like 7th grade, he was like, "Oh, you got to check it out. I got the Marvel swimsuit edition." And it was like this kind of secretive, dirty thing. And so like that image of She-Hulk, I guess, just never left my mind. It was just so out there. So once that was one of the first things I wrote for this show, and it kind of stuck through every draft.
Now, speaking of drafts, when you sit down to write a pilot like this, do you go from beginning to end, or do you just kind of have sections that you write and then they piece it all together later?
So with this particular one, I had written it as like kind of a full-length pilot a few years ago, and it took place in the past, so like the late 90s, and it also took place in the present, so you kind of saw kind of a back and forth, who they were then versus who they are now.
Right.
And then when I decided to produce this at the beginning of last year, people always really liked the parts where they were like the flashback stuff to the late 90s, early 2000s.
Right.
And so to me, I was like, well, that's kind of the natural way to make a show. Shows like the Goldbergs are kind of highlighting what it was like growing up in specific periods of time, and I thought it could kind of fit into that kind of box. And so I decided to put all the focus onto that. And that kind of changed it to a kind of more of a nostalgia piece versus kind of a passage through time.
Well, plus I think having to do current day and then flashbacks might have been, because you raised a lot of money on Indiegogo, but in comparison to what a normal pilot would cost, you were pretty your budget was pretty minuscule.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there was no way we could have done like kind of the full-length pilot and shown both time periods.
Now the big question here, and it's just a real quick one, at some point when the show gets picked up, because the show is going to get picked up, let's be honest, it's really good.
From your lips to the executive's ears.
That's right. Listen to me, people. Would you have wanted a Stan cameo?
Oh, I mean, yeah. Stanley was the greatest.
Well, now that we can't, who would you want?
I mean, so I guess to my generation, kind of like that kind of voice, the guy that kind of talked to you and kind of compelled you to want to be a writer and be creative was Kevin Smith. I mean, he was the first guy to make it seem possible for me, where you can just kind of make something with your friends with a hockey stick, boom mic, and all that kind of stuff. So I think Kevin Smith would be incredible.
Oh yeah, and now he's actually back to his pre-Clerks weight, so it'll work.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's you know what? I love the guy. Don't get me wrong. I have my moments where I'm not a fan of what he does, but like yoga hosers are just come on, please, why Kevin? But I think he looks a little sick.
Well, he did have some health issues recently.
Yeah,
so.
But I mean, there's losing weight, and then like I think he lost it really fast.
Yeah.
And but it's I mean, hey, all the power to him for getting healthy. That's great,
Sure.
And I can't wait to see him reboot Jay and Bob.
Yeah. So he's doing that. I mean, like that original New Jersey trilogy was like the holy trinity of like independent films when I was in high school.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, and I've always thought I was a better writer than director, just like him.
Yes, he's definitely.
Now that's something I wanted to ask, or a couple of things I want to ask you real quick. First off, why is it you've never directed your own stuff?
I have in the past. I directed a few episodes of We Need Girlfriends. So Robert Vornkall directed this. He was a friend from college, and he's directed a couple feature films that you can find on Amazon. Nowhere, Michigan, and Completely Normal. And, directing and writing are two totally different skills. And I've always felt more comfortable writing the story than I have kind of leading the charge on a set.
Right.
And I knew we had to do this in 2 days. And it was a lot of, there were different sets and kind of a big cast in the convention scenes. So I needed someone who was a leader and who could take kind of my creative vision and take it to the next step. And so Rob was the natural choice for me.
Now, that's something that people don't seem to understand is you're basically the showrunner. And what people don't seem to understand when it comes to TV is that the showrunner, as the showrunner, you're basically the head writer too. And when it breaks down to is that a lot of people complain when it comes to film, it's like, oh, I wrote that script, but at the end, in post, it's like you're rewriting it again. Now the problem with that is with TV, you don't run into that issue because you wrote it and you're there getting final cut. As the showrunner, you have a say over how the ending comes. So that's kind of like, I wonder if that's why TV is so like this golden chalice for filmmaking now.
Yeah, well, and so I also worked very closely with my supervising producer Becca Valenti, and we were kind of on the ground, finding the locations, assembling the cast, and all that kind of stuff. So it was a real team effort from all the people involved, and I just because I wrote it, I had a passion for what I wanted to see from it. But all of these people contributed to this and brought their own taste to the project.
Now, was there a big difference between from the final draft of the script to what you see on the screen after editing?
No, I mean, we cut a few lines, but it was pretty much the exact same thing.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I like when things just move smoothly like that.
Yes. Yeah. It was. There were many. I'm kind of like an obsessive when it comes to writing and rewriting. So there were many drafts that I just did on my own, like tweaking little lines here and there.
Right. I remember reading a draft of the like an early draft.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think wasn't there one where they were at San Diego?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or New York.
Yeah, New York. Yeah.
Comic-Con. Yes.
Yeah. So that's a pretty early draft, wasn't it?
Yeah. That was 2014, and so that had actually I brought it to the Austin Film Festival. It was accepted into the Austin Film Festival. So that's around that time. Yeah.
So see, people, you can get your scripts submitted to film festivals too, and you can win stuff.
Yeah, the Austin Film Festivals is the best one I've been to as far as writing festivals.
Perfect. Now, here's the next question, and I have to ask this. My nerd side will not let me not ask this question.
Of course.
Whose collection was that?
So some of it was mine. Most of it was my friend Bob Winters, who is the best. And he's in the show. He plays Kevin, who's the tall guy that the dealer who's angry at him about nipples in the batsuit is always yelling at.
Okay.
And Bob came to my house with, just a trunk full of his own stuff and was very proud of it. And I'm glad so much of it is in the show.
So whose collection did the swimsuit issue come from?
I specifically bought that for the show. So I had to go on eBay for that one.
What's something like that run you? I gotta ask what that's going for now.
I think it was $10 to $15.
Oh, see, now it's gonna go up higher now. It's gonna go up higher now once the show gets picked up.
If someone wants to buy the actual copy, they're welcome to.
Now, when you were doing the Indiegogo, you were giving away your own collection to certain tiers. Now, why did you want to do that? I gotta ask, why?
Just for incentives, like to try to motivate people. And actually, in addition to that, I sold a lot of my own personal memorabilia on eBay to fund some of this.
What's the one thing that you are gonna miss the most that you had to sell on eBay?
That's the easiest question anyone's ever asked me. I had a Superpowers Plastic Man figure.
Oh no.
Yeah, and I have a lot of the Superpowers figures, and Plastic Man was one of my favorites. And yeah, but I can't complain. It was such an incredible experience that
it was all worth it in the end.
It was totally worth it. Totally worth it.
So now, what are your hopes for this? You're gonna be submitting it to festivals and stuff. It doesn't have the usual runtime of a television program, because even with commercials now, what is it, 22 minutes?
Yeah. 20 to 21.
Okay, so when I watched it was what, 15?
Yes. Yeah.
So now, are you looking for like kind of some like a Netflix type thing or a TV, or what's your ideal goal for this?
My ideal goal is to sell this as an ongoing series. I think streaming or web would be great, but I'm also obviously open to network, having done that in the past. I just want to tell more stories about these characters in this world. What it was like to be a nerd before nerd culture was a thing.
Right.
And also just I really like the characters. The leads, Alan and Phil. The character of Becky, who's played by Galia Loeb. I think there's so many story opportunities there to tell a story about two guys who've never had a female friend, and to see how they change as the world changes around them.
Yeah, I mean, and I remember as I was growing up and watching things change like that, you're kind of like, wow, this is great, and but then you realize that everybody is going to be in on this now, and it used to be where if something like Batman's Wedding came up, you'd get the speculators that would come in. Because I think people don't seem to understand when it comes to collecting comic book stuff, is that there's collectors and that there's speculators.
Mm-hmm.
And that and then we get all of the same all the kind at the comic shop here in town, and you hate those people because they come in and they'll buy 5 or 6 copies of a comic, and it's like, well, I didn't get my copy. Like, well, they already came in and bought them all.
Yes.
And all they're doing is to put it on eBay.
Yeah, and I remember like in the early 90s going to baseball card conventions. My dad was big into those, and you would see people buy, just stacks and stacks of these baseball cards, thinking that they would one day be worth something. And then that kind of trickled into comic books with like the hologram covers and the different editions.
Oh boy.
But guys like us who just want to read them, it's a different animal.
Oh, definitely. And we're at a point where it's like, okay, well, I got to worry about how much room I have left to put stuff, and they're just like, well, I'll just sell it. It's like, I don't want to sell it. It breaks your heart to sell it. Like when you mentioned the super powered Plastic Man.
Yeah.
That's, it's not exactly an easy thing being a nerd. And not from a social standpoint anymore. But and like I told you before, I'm gonna say this so everybody can hear it this time. Everybody who knows me knows that I detest The Big Bang Theory. I think it is a pile of hot garbage. Hot and Nerdy is the anti-Big Bang Theory. It shows what nerds really are like, not like whatever Jim Parsons is doing. Was that what you were going for? Kind of like, hey, no, this is how we really are.
Well, so We Need Girlfriends had sold to CBS in 2007, which was when The Big Bang Theory premiered. And so we were told, just watch How I Met Your Mother and watch The Big Bang Theory. And so, it's you wear a Green Lantern shirt now and people say, oh, it's you're just like Sheldon. And it's like, no, I'm not. This is the Green Lantern. This is a person I've loved for years. And so, I don't like that kind of big, broad, nerdy character. I think that there are many dimensions to these characters that are not present in that show. But, they're trying to do the big CBS sitcom, so.
Yeah, definitely. And that's I don't know. So, where can people? Okay, well, first let's ask you this: what do you have on down the pipe? I mean, is there more you're working on now, or are you just kind of focusing on Hot and Nerdy?
Yeah, I'm focusing on Hot and Nerdy. I'm writing more of it, developing more of a pitch, and hoping that I can, start showing it to people once it has the festival run.
Well, that's awesome. And where can people find you on the internet?
Oh, geez. Let's see. What's my Twitter name again? I forget. I think it's Steven Staples 81.
Okay, that's
Does
probably.
that make sense?
Oh yeah, that definitely makes sense because I would hate to try and pronounce my name and make people spell it.
Yes, Steven Staples 81. And if you want to see Hot and Nerdy, feel free to message me, and I'll send you the link. It's
worth it, people. So you should really definitely do that. And I would love to have you back on so we can talk more and we can talk about what happened with Weenie because we're running out of time here. But we can talk about. Actually, you know what? We're gonna. You know what? This is what we're gonna do, people. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do a little extra post show where we talk about something else. It'll only be for a few minutes. But I want to thank everybody for listening. Head over to ron.world, all the links and everything. Have yourself a good week. And don't forget to feed the fish.